black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain, turned and stared at me. And this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We'll be talking to Taz. And Taz was actually out working on these remote cell towers in Pennsylvania. He stepped away from the group, and one of these creatures actually jumped out of a tree. It's a very fascinating account. We'll also be talking to Randy Harrington. And Randy's actually been working on a property with Shane Carpenter in the Ozarks out there in Missouri. Or Missouri if you're OG. And he'll be sharing all sorts of things that they have going on out there. And it's very interesting the way what these guys are doing out there to provoke these things to come in. And we'll wrap up with Will. Will is actually from Las Vegas. He had an encounter in Georgia. Has nothing to do with Bigfoot. He saw these lights approach the home. He blacked out when they got real close. And I really wanted to hear what happened to him. And then we'll also have a surprise guest.
It's a trap!
Oops, wrong button. Sorry about that. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Taz to the show. Taz, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me, Wes.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate being here, man. And I know your encounter took place in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
If you would you just kind of start from the beginning, tell us what you were doing, and walk us into what happened? What did you see?
Okay. I was working in I live in New Jersey. I was working in Pennsylvania, working at a cell tower, cellular phone antenna tower. And it was up in the mountains. The company I worked for at the time, we would go around, went to Kentucky, we're all over doing different cell sites. And this day we were there. It was summertime. We got to the tower about 7 o'clock in the morning. Got it, the truck unloaded. There was 4 of us. And the guys, they all knew that I'm deathly afraid of snakes. Like, I'd run like a little girl. You even say the word snake, I'm out of here. And they were constantly teasing me with the snakes, like, oh, there's a snake right there, and I would jump, So I had walked into it's like a hut where they keep all the communication systems, all the computers and everything that will power the cell site. And when I came out, one of the guys had put a fake snake on the step. I screamed, they laughed. It's big fun, fun and games when it's all on my expense. We climbed the tower. We've been working up in the tower all day, It's lunchtime. We come down, we're eating, and I had to go to the bathroom. So since we're out in the middle of nowhere, there's no bathroom, so I go out into the woods. I took a 5-gallon bucket and a plastic bag, some toilet paper, went out to do my business. And as I'm out in the woods, I don't say I walked too far away, but far enough away so maybe they would forget that I was out there, so they wouldn't, come out and try to mess with me with a snake or something like that, fake snake, whatever.
Yeah.
So I doing my business, and I hear leaves, the sounds. I want to say walking, but you could just hear leaves rustling, the sliding, the crackling of leaves. If you, a bunch of kids or whatever walking around the woods, you'd hear. That's what it sounded like. So I finished my business. I tie the bag up, and now I'm getting ready. These guys want to mess with me with a snake. They're going to get covered in shit. Sorry. It's just, you come at me with a fake snake, I'm coming at you with a bag of poop.
Yeah.
So I sit and I see the leaves falling from above. I'm like, what the hell? I look up, and all of a sudden this big mass of something falls or jumps out of the tree. And when it hit the ground, it just stood straight up. Like it hit the ground as if you or I would jump off of something, and when you land on your feet, you sort of bend at the knee to try to, I guess, absorb the impact. And it just stood straight up, and it started to walk. It took about 2 steps, and it stopped. And it turned, and it felt like, as I'm looking at this, it turned in slow motion and looked right at me. And it just stopped and stared at me, and here I am, standing with a bag of shit in my hand and looking at this thing, like, in amazement, like, what is this? What am I looking at? Is this for real? It just looked at me. It made a growling noise, not loud, but it made a growling noise, and it just turned and kept walking. And I stood there, like, not being able to understand where I was, what I was doing, who I was. It felt like a lifetime standing there. And I walked out of the woods and went back to work. The guys asked me, what took you so long, or what was that noise? And I was pale as a ghost. In the middle of summertime, sun. I was tan, extremely tan, and I was white as a ghost. Didn't say a word until that night when we got back to the hotel. The guy that I was rooming with, he's like, "Yo, Taz, what's wrong, man? You seem a little off. You all right?" I'm like, "Bill, I think I saw Bigfoot." There's no Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. I'm like, well, I saw something. Well, maybe it was a bear. No, it wasn't a bear. Why do you know it wasn't a bear? Because I know what a bear looks like. It wasn't a bear. Well, what could it have been? It could have been a Bigfoot. Well, what else could it have been? Nothing else. That's the only thing it could have been, because that's what I saw. I mean, there's no, well, it could have been a dog, or it could have been a bird. Now, you know the difference between a dog and a bird. Well, you should know the difference between a Bigfoot and a bear, especially when you're 40 feet away looking at it.
Yeah, and that's really close. And the whole bear comment that people make drives me nuts, because even a little kid knows what a bear looks like.
Is that the whole thing? So if you're out in the woods and you see something and you don't want to know what it is, it's got to be a bear?
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of people's arguments, especially when they make it to hunters, which makes me laugh even more. But
like a hunter's not going to know what a bear is.
Right, yeah. Let me ask you, so it's 40 feet away, it comes out of the tree, and I've had a lot of reports of them coming out of the tree. I know a lot of times people will say only the smaller ones are in trees. That's not really true. Right. I've heard many, many accounts of 8, 9 feet tall, huge things coming out of trees, falling out of trees. I think I've only had one report. I take that back. I've had 2 reports of them falling out of trees. But most of the time when they come out of the trees, it's exactly how you describe it. They don't bend their knee. They just land, unlike how we would land. to absorb the shock. For the audience, can you describe what you saw? I mean, it's 40 feet away. It's daytime. I know you're in shock, but can you describe for the audience what you saw?
I saw a creature about over 8 feet tall, at least 8 foot, maybe like 8.5 foot tall. If I had to guesstimate the weight, oh my Lord, I was 900 pounds. I mean, this thing was huge. It was big. It was massive. It was just the shoulder width apart was. I mean, I'm 5'9", so this thing, the shoulder width apart had to be 5 foot. I mean, this thing was amazing. I mean, I've never seen something like this ever. Just you could see the muscle and the strength. The size of its hands were the size of his hands. He could have palmed my body. I mean, I think if he grabbed, I'm about 200 now. I'm about 230 pounds. His hand, he could probably grab a hold of my ribs, and his fingertips will probably reach around the other side. And this thing was huge. He showed his teeth at me, like kind of like a snarl. Like I guess that's when he was growling at me. I did see whites of his eyes. The white was not as prominent as the color part of his eye. They weren't black eyes or the red eyes or the green eyes. It was like a brownish, like a dark brown, like a caramel dark brown type of eye. But I did see, little bits of white in there, like towards the edges. Its nose, I saw its nose. I saw just facial features of a very ugly human. But the hair was on the face. It was covered the whole body. But it did not look like a monkey face. I mean, I guess it did have similarities towards of a monkey, but more human than anything. Like I believe 100% more human than anything. I believe that these things are more human than we give them credit for, or more people would be willing to say. Maybe because of the fact that they're trying to justify if they ever see one, they want to shoot it, because this way it's not considered murder. But I believe these things are more human than anything.
And what makes you say that, Taz? Was it mainly the features of the face and just the way it looked at you, or what gives you that impression? The features of its face, yes. The way, from listening to your show, the stories, and the intelligence this thing has. Now I know there's animals they're very highly intelligent in certain ways. Dogs, cats, any animal, they're intelligent in their own way. But this thing, seems to be a little more intelligent than anything. Its way of thinking, it has to have a thought process. I listened to your show where people say that it knows what a gun is. Well, if you were born and I kept you in captivity and you knew nothing of what a gun is, and now somebody shows you a gun, why would you have the reaction of, don't do that? That's not good, or that's dangerous. I think the way they process things is different and is much more advanced than we give them credit for. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I mean, most wild animals, that would have been a bear. It would have come out of the tree and either ran or attacked you. Yes. Cougar, same thing. It would have ran, or they're not going to step back, look at you, give you the stink eye, and then slowly walk off. Exactly. Yeah, that's what it looked like. It gave me the stink eye. You were right. I like that. Yeah. I like that comparison. When you were looking at the mouth, were the teeth white? Can you describe the teeth? I know it kind of snarled real quick at you. Yeah. Well, it showed its teeth at me as if maybe some people could take it as a grin or like a laugh or like it looked like he was trying to push a fart out, like straining on something. And he showed me these teeth,
They were white, yes. I mean, they weren't bright white. I mean, obviously, you don't go to a dentist. They weren't bright white, but they were white. There was the canines. I did see the canines. And I heard you say something to say, no, it's just flat teeth like ours. In this one, I saw it had the little points on the top and the bottom on the canine teeth. I saw, sticks and leaves and stuff in its hair. His hair was very matted. The smell, after listening, I do not recall the smell. I don't recall a smell of anything. Maybe there was, I just don't remember. I mean, this is going back 19 years ago. So,
yeah, no, I understand. And most witnesses don't. I would say most encounters, people don't mention a smell. Sometimes they do, but not. I would say more often than not, they don't mention a smell. Why do you think it didn't attack you?
When I, had told people, they say that the reason why it didn't attack me is because it didn't want to get covered in shit from me throwing the bag at it. I tell them I do comedy. I do stand-up comedy. I do a comedy radio show. So I do believe that when I'm telling it, sometimes people think it's part of my act. But I don't know. I think it was. I 100% believe there was more of them. Because like I told you before, before I had walked out into the woods, 7:45, we're up in the tower. I'm over 200 feet in the air, and I heard the rock clapping, the tree knocking, the chatter, the whoops. I heard a couple whoops going through there, but I didn't, just really pay attention to it because we're working and we're doing our own thing. But I think that they were watching us. I think once I walked into the woods, it was on alert that here's one of them. Are the other three coming in? What's their intentions? Are they going to kill us? What do they want? And when they saw the one being me, I think he jumped out of the tree to retreat and get out of there.
Yeah, that actually makes. I know when we talked earlier, you'd mentioned that, and that actually makes the most sense to me. Because if it attacks you, the rest of them are going to show up. But it was definitely on guard. Growling. One thing that you had mentioned when we talked on the phone earlier, you were talking about the growl. How it wasn't really that loud, but you felt it, and I get that. I completely get that because I experienced something very similar.
It felt like the growl, like. I know they say that sometimes the scream was so loud it paralyzed me. Well, the scream was not loud, but it paralyzed me. And two of the guys I was working with heard something. One definitely said, "I heard. What was that noise? What were you growling at?" The other two heard. One heard the noise, the other one didn't hear a thing. When it landed, when it jumped out of the tree. It may sound far-fetched, but I kind of felt the ground. Like I felt the impact of, I guess, a little vibration from when it hit the ground. I felt something. Not saying that the ground moved, it threw me off my feet. No, but I did feel something. Now, maybe because once I'm watching this thing fall from the tree, it just seemed like everything stopped and everything was over heightened and slow motion, and it just, so maybe that's what it was. But I it's like I felt the thud of when it hit the ground. If he turned and came at me on his third step, he would have had me in his hands.
That biggest strides at 40 feet doesn't shock me one bit. Doesn't really shock me one bit.
I wish I would have saw the other ones. I would love, everybody's careful what you wish for. You're right. I never wished to see a Bigfoot ever. I saw one. I would like to see another one, but not that close. Just because of, I guess, the shock, of, for years, is that what I really saw? Did I really see a Bigfoot? you try to talk myself out of it. Nah, you didn't see that. It had to be a bear. It had to be a person. It had to be, something. But no, I mean, 100%.
And I think that's common to feel. I think it's honestly common to feel that way, Taz. I mean, I think all of us go through it who've seen one. And even people who haven't seen one. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, you were talking about hearing the whoops. And I played it on the show one time, and this is a couple of years back. I had a hunter contact me, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I hear that on my property all the time." And I go, "Really?" And as him and I were talking, he goes, "I just thought it was a bird." And I was like, what bird makes a whoop sound? But after doing the show for a while, I understand where people are coming from because they're trying to make sense of what they're hearing. And you going through that process of like, did I really see that? Could it have been a bear? Could it have been a person? Did I have a mental breakdown at that moment and I didn't really see this? And I think that's our way of trying to cope with trying to make sense of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because Sasquatch makes no sense.
No. I mean, you're talking something that is that big, that is that powerful, and nobody is, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but not the world don't believe in it. Not everybody in this world believes in it. To sit there and say to pinpoint that they don't live in Pennsylvania. That's what I got for years. I still get it today. Or Bigfoot, they don't climb trees. How's a 900-pound thing going to climb a tree? How does anything climb a tree?
I don't know, though. Grizzly bear can climb a tree pretty quick. Yeah, and they're pretty big. I mean. So
for people to say Bigfoot can't climb a tree because they're too big, they're too heavy. Well, why? Yeah, it's not gonna climb a 3-year-old sapling. No, but you have a tree that's been out in the woods, for 50, 60 years. Why can't it climb it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they're definitely in Pennsylvania. I get tons of reports from Pennsylvania. Did you ever go back out with that job, or did you quit? Or
after that job was a 2-day job. The second day was, obviously just going back, and they had to orientate the antennas and do last minute tuning up, and they left. It was only probably I didn't go back. After talking with the guy I roomed with, my friend Bill, I told him, and he's, teasing me. The next day I, figured, because they were like, "Oh, be careful, Bigfoot's going to get you tomorrow." So I kind of said, I don't feel good today. Yeah, I can't go back out there. I was going to stay back in the hotel. And then when they came back at probably around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we went and looked at the next job for the next day, which was nowhere near that area. And we left. I kind of regret it now not going back, because maybe I could have showed them, or maybe the maybe that one or another one or or a couple of them would have been visible, and I could have showed somebody else. Hey, look, that's what I saw, but it just, I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking like, trying to did I really see that? And if I did, thank heavens it didn't come at me, because I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a terrifying account, especially when you're face to face with it like that, because you really are at its mercy. I mean, even if you have a gun in your hand, you're still at its mercy.
I mean, when I was talking to you earlier, I had told you, I got turned on your show by a coworker who never said he had an encounter, but he does believe in it. He's an avid hunter, and he would never say that he believes in it, because he doesn't want to, get tormented or get his balls busted. He's a good friend of mine. I'll give him a shout out to Jonesy. I want to thank him for turning me on to your show, because he even told me when in confidence, he's like, "Look, maybe you should call and talk to Wes, and he can help you, understand what you saw, or tell you, is that really what you saw?" Maybe after telling him your story, he might say, "Hey, listen, Taz, I understand it was a frightful encounter, but no, you did not see a Bigfoot. You saw this, or you saw that." And he goes, or maybe he'll tell you, "Hey, yeah, you did see one," and help you to understand a little bit better of what you saw, what actually happened to you.
Well, and I appreciate him saying that. And I think you're spot on with your impression of what happened. I think he probably jumped out of the tree, kind of turned around, gave you the, like I said before, the stink eye of don't follow me and this isn't a time to play games. And he walked off, and thank God he did, because I was telling you before, they're never alone. Rarely are they ever alone. We were talking about the shots fired last week, that episode.
Right.
And I mean, when he talks about shooting one, I asked him how long before the rest of them came in, 20 or 30 minutes. That tells you right there, there's a bunch of them around. They were probably watching what was going on. And it was, and so my point is, I don't think that they're ever alone, or there's another one nearby. What do you think that Sasquatch is, Taz? What's your opinion?
I believe it's more human than animal. I believe it's definitely superior. The paranormal, that gets me when they say, or, from another planet or another dimension, there's possibility. I mean, at this point, you kind of want to say at this early stages of research, but it's not early stages of research. I mean, Bigfoot has been talked about for centuries, but I think, I want to say it's a cross between a man and a primate. Okay, possible. I do think it's maybe more human DNA in it than anything else. Just how did they get the genetics of this thing to be so huge and so powerful? I mean, imagine putting that type of strength and size into a human. I mean, the NFL would be changed overnight.
Yeah, it would. It really would.
The NBA would be changed. All sporting would be completely changed.
The part that's really fascinating for me is when I get reports from and I've said this a million times on the show, but when I get reports, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, people on the East Coast will say that. They will say they think it was more human looking. And you get out here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's the complete opposite. People will say, no, it reminded them of an ape. Kind of had the facial features of a man, but it was more animal-like.
Right.
And so it makes me wonder, about different types of these things because of people's descriptions around the country. It really depends on what part of the country you're in, depending on what description you're going to get from people. And so I find that fascinating. I generally agree with you. I do think somewhere between a human and an animal, it's somewhere in there. I'm not too hard on people when they say, well, I think it's more human-like or closer to us, because I think people might be right about that. Not that they're human, because they don't look human. It's not like I came out of the tree, turned around and growled at you, and then walked off. But having said that, I can understand why people say that, especially with a lot of the features that they have. I hear a lot of, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I hear a lot of, especially in Pennsylvania, I've heard many times, it reminded them of kind of like a Native American, and I hope that comes across the right way. But
yes.
Native Americans have beautiful features. They have high cheekbones, they have big eyes, and they have very beautiful features. And I hear that on the East Coast, it had high cheekbones, big eyes, and kind of looked kind of human-like.
I mean, if you would take, you see shows or whatever, or even people in general will do the pros and cons list. Okay, so we get the little scale, we get the marbles. And one side of the scale is we'll put a marble every time we say a human feature or a human way of acting. And then on the other side's an animal. And you put the marbles back and forth. Which side's going to fill up first? In my opinion, I'm going to say the human side, because you're going to go with its features, with its fingers and its toes and its eyes, its face, its way of thinking. An animal side, you're going to get maybe its way of living, or its way of acting as far as the physicalities towards when it reacts. An animal, you can reason with a human. If I'm in the woods and I'm hunting or whatever, or I have a gun pointed at you, you can talk to me to reason with me not to kill you. But an animal, you can't reason with an animal, or not to kill you, not to charge you, not to attack you. I'm just, that's how I look at it. Try to look at it anyway, is in a way of okay, you're saying it's more human. I'm saying it's more human. So let's what part makes it more human to you than more animal, or what part makes it more animal to you than more human? And I don't disagree with anybody out there when they come across and they say it's 100%, they believe it's an animal, or they believe it's an alien, or they believe it's this, because that's your belief. And I am nobody to tell you you shouldn't believe in that, or you shouldn't believe it that way. I'll tell you my way of belief, and I'm not saying mine's right either.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, that's a great illustration. Just like your encounter. Any other animal on this planet would have either ran or killed you.
Yes.
There would have been no in between. But this thing reacted. I mean, I realize a growl isn't human. The growl is very more animalistic, especially the way it hits you and kind of shakes you. But having said that, it kind of turned and looked at you and then strolled off, which is that an animal? I don't know. I mean, it seems odd for an animal to behave that way, I mean,
is there any other animal out there that can walk on its 2 feet like us, bipedal?
Yeah, there's a couple, but not for long distances, generally speaking, Not really in North America. I mean, I guess we have bears, but I've seen bears up on 2 legs, and they're clumsy, they're slow, it's not a fluid motion when they're on 2 legs.
I honestly feel with this encounter, I feel blessed to have seen this, because there are millions of people out there in the country that they have never seen one, and they don't believe, or there's people out there who believe but they've never seen one, and there's people out there who have heard but has never seen. And I guess to say I was a fortunate one to have seen it. I wish there was no cell, there was no, this is back in the late 1999. We didn't have cell cameras on the cell phones. Not that I would have thought of taking a picture. I mean, I'm standing there with, swinging a bag, a plastic bag full of human feces. I wonder what it would have done if I would have thrown the bag at it, and it would have had, my shit all over its head.
Probably would have killed you. Probably would have killed you. And thank goodness you didn't. And I think that's one of the things with us being human beings. You'll find a lot of times where when you're in shock, you don't do anything. You just stand there. And I think it throws these things off. They're like, this guy's not running. This guy's not screaming. This guy, he's in shock. And then I think it works as a protective measure for us sometimes. But it's a fascinating account, Taz, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it.
Thank you. Like I had said to you before, and I'll tell anybody out there, if they had an encounter, maybe they're afraid or embarrassed to come forward, I do recommend sending Wes an email, because it helps out a lot to get it out. It helps for you to understand, and for you to lay your head down on the pillow. I'll be able to lay my head on my pillow tonight knowing that I was maybe able to help somebody else. Maybe they saw something, or there's something that they can look for so they can protect themselves when they're out there. I did not have a gun. I said to myself, when I first turned on to your show, let me listen, let me hear these encounters. When you had over 500 people call, talk, interviews you've done, I want to listen to them. I want to see, because I was told they don't live in Pennsylvania. So after I heard a few episodes of Pennsylvania, okay, now I want to know if it does this. I want to know if it does that. And because I didn't want to call you and make an ass out of myself or your show. The show is great. I'm hooked on it. I'm nonstop just looking for anything you say, do, where you're at, what you're doing, where you're going, because I think it's fascinating. And I think you're doing great work out there with people, and you're helping a lot of people. And I hope one day I get to meet you face to face and shake your hand.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for the kind words.
Thank you very much, Wes.
And next up on the show, I want to welcome Randy Harrington. Randy, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming back on. I know I've had you on, Randy, the show several times. And for the audience out there, I've had Randy on. He did the empty tent where he would set up a fake campsite and observe it from a distance. And you always come up with great ideas, Randy. You know, a lot of great ideas. But I know you and Shane Carpenter have been out there working on this property in the Ozarks. Tell us about this property.
Well, yeah, it's a property in southern Missouri, Ozarks, and there's a lot of stuff going on down there. And I was invited by Shane Carpenter to go with him, another gentleman, Chris Reinhardt, as a group to kind of camp on this property. But it wasn't just a camp out. It was actually the property was vested by Shane. He'd spent some time there, and so he only invited us after he had spent quite a bit of time there himself. Footprints and actually a handprint also, as well as a lot of activity. He had us come down there and join him. And we brought some, equipment with us. So that's how this all panned out. It's really opened some doors for us, what's going on there. We are in the process of, trying to put together, a documentary about our 5-day camp out there that has given us so much.
Yeah, and I know the property owner actually requested you guys come out, didn't he? Because he had seen the creature or creatures.
Yes. He was hunting, and while he was in his stand, he saw something step out of a tree line and walk down the tree line, or the wooded area, and walk down the tree line and go back in, and it spooked him pretty bad. So I think he even had somebody accompany him going back to retrieve his tree stand after that. So long story short, he contacted Shane, and Shane spent some considerable amount of time there, setting up hike patterns and things like that, and developing, a good overview of the area, and started to create some patterns that was getting hits, from our target species, and that's how this all transpired.
And what did you think when you first went on the property? I mean, was there anything that stood out to you where you went, yeah, we need to spend some time here? Was there anything that really kind of stood out to you?
It really, to me, it felt a lot like some of the areas that I'd been down to in southeast Oklahoma. Even though it's southern Missouri, they're still all tied together. These foothills, same type of growth and thick woods, and the type of terrain. So it struck me as being very similar to the areas that I'd spent a lot of time in southeast Oklahoma.
Yeah, I agree. And so you guys show up on the property, and I know we wanted to discuss the rock thing, which I thought was brilliant. And we'll get to that in a minute, but I thought it was brilliant when you told me. I was like, no, it's one of those Randy Harrington, Paul Graves moments where I'm like, I don't know about that. Then all of a sudden, bam, it works. Before you get into that, you guys hang out on the property, and what kind of things are happening to make you think, okay, let's spend some time here. Let's actually focus our energies on what's going on here?
Well, first off, don't give me any credit for this. I just happen to be an innocent bystander. Shane, and we filmed it. Actually, we filmed it because it was just one of those things that we were trying to document. But so I'll go ahead and lay out what happened.
we get on the property, and if you've watched the teaser to our documentary, you know that there was a couple of instances where we got some thermal videos, and this particular area was nicknamed Crawler Hill. And it was called Crawler Hill by Shane because prior to us even getting a thermal video up there, he was doing a hike and was getting followed by something that was pacing him, and he was catching it with his GoPro camera. It was following him and popping its head up over the crest of this hill, which was an interesting behavior. So it was staying low to the ground, but just popping up to view him as he was walking, and filming it with his GoPro camera over the crest of this hill. So this was the same area that we kind of cut and made a trail that we could get the Polaris up into in order to take all of our camping supplies up there one night. And so we set up a tent, and we were there, and it didn't take long to start getting some activity, and we were getting kind of excited about it. So we set out our recorders, which is basically, my parabolic mic. And so above us, we started getting this activity. And it's what you'd expect, rocks being thrown and just movements and sound and brush popping and things like that. So we were kind of enjoying this. So we kind of retreated back into the tent and let things unfold. And this is where it gets good, because what we had happen is typically what a lot of people have happen when you have rocks thrown at you and all the activity that accompanies rocks being thrown. But what's interesting is it was verified by something that Shane did, and he ended up marking some rocks and placing them into positions that eventually got thrown back down into the area and verified, which kind of knocked me for a loop.
Tell me about that. How did he mark them? I mean, what did he do to mark them, and how did the creatures get a hold of them?
Well, the first night that we were in the tent, and we got pummeled with rocks constantly, all night long. You could hear rocks hitting off of the table, off of the chair, all around the campsite. Some even hit the Polaris Ranger. And so what he did was gathered up some rocks. Well, first, he went up and found where these creatures were actually throwing the rocks from that we had recorded. So he, using his tracking abilities, he went up there and he found the location that they were launching the rocks from because of what we recorded. And there was just a little crest of a hill above us, maybe 30 yards, 40 yards, and it went back into a thick area of trees, and he found foot tracks back in this area. And when you couple that with the recordings, which these things were coming out, launching their rocks, and then retreating, this is all recorded. We recorded the whole night. And so fortunately, it was verified with not only where he found the foot tracks, and it also was verified by the recordings of the rocks hitting and landing and retreating back over the crest of this hill. And he found the exact spot that they were doing this from. And so what he did was he marked about 40 or 50 rocks, 30 or 40 rocks, give or take. and marked them with a Sharpie pen and put marks on the rocks, went up there, placed them in two or three different spots that you can tell where all their foot tracks were. And it appeared to be the two juveniles of this family unit that were the ones doing the rock throwing. And, and this goes back to what we had ascertained before when we think about, which type of creature has the time and the energy to be able to spend that much time to throw rocks all night long is what it seemed like. So which ones really has that kind of time to put into this effort? And so we just guesstimated logically that it was probably a juvenile activity. And I'm not saying that adult Bigfoots don't do this, but when it comes to all night long having rocks launched at you, which ones really has the time to do this? And it was apparently at this particular location the two juveniles of a family unit that were doing this because of the size verification of the foot tracks.
And that's what I was going to ask, if it was just kind of a rough theory or if it was based on the tracks. That's fascinating. That's smart, man. Marking rocks and then having them throw at you, and you can almost kind of tell which pile the rocks are being thrown from and where they're being thrown from, where it's actually coming from.
Well, Shane is actually editing it probably as we speak, and he's going to put it out on his little channel there, Ozark Mountain Sasquatch. And what is amazing to me is he marked these rocks with a black Sharpie pen, and he went up there, and based on where it looked like all of this was happening was just over the crest of hill above where we set up our tent and our campsite. It was just above us because that's where we were getting that. We knew that's where we were getting all the rocks coming from because they were only hitting on the high side of our tent coming from that particular area. We didn't know exactly. We just knew that it was happening. Rocks were hitting the tent. It was hitting the chair. Actually, you could hear it skip off the plastic table that I had all my equipment and my laptops sitting on. You could hear a rock glance off that plastic table, and it was also hitting the Polaris Ranger, all on the uphill side. So they were strategically positioning themselves above us. So I don't know if that's just gives them the advantage. Of course, it gives them easy to monitor what's going on, and it gave them a comfort area back in the woods there, and it also allowed them to step out above us and be able to retreat back to a comfort that they had to be able to retreat back into. What I like is Shane marked these rocks, and we recorded the whole thing, and he placed them in 2 or 3 areas, and actually they didn't touch the rocks at all in an area that we thought was the biggest tree that they could hide behind, and they didn't touch those rocks at all. But there were 2 other piles of 7 or 8, 10 rocks that were completely gone, and we found them around our campsite, and one specifically that hit the Polaris Ranger and landed by one of the tires had the marks on it. So that was just blew me away, because that is just one of their behaviors that everyone has experiences with. Rocks hitting cabins, rocks hitting vehicles, rocks hitting tents, just rocks being thrown. So here we have them actually throwing the rocks that we planted.
Yeah, it's smart. It's very smart. I wanted to ask you, has there been any more aggression beyond throwing rocks, or has that been the height of it?
No, and that's just a matter of perception. If you think that's aggression, I never thought that it was an aggressive thing when they're throwing rocks.
Well,
it just doesn't.
If I pick up a rock, and throw it at you, you may not think it's too funny. That's kind of the way I look at it. You know what I mean?
That's because that's our perception of what we would be doing if we were throwing rocks.
Yeah,
because
I understand.
we wouldn't like somebody. Yeah. That doesn't mean the same thing to them. I don't think.
Good point.
Because they could throw a rock as big as my laptop or as big as a cinder block and crush the middle of your tent and make it absolutely clear that they wanted you gone. But they seem to be satisfied with just dinking and dunking little bitty rocks. So think of it this way. Here's a creature that is just as astounded at us as we are of them, because there's something that looks like us but yet is covered in hair. To them, we're something that looks just like them but we're not covered in hair, and they seem to be fascinated with us. Curiosity is their Achilles heel. You can absolutely count on that without fault. It's a constant, so you have to learn to work with it, and I think we are really learning to work with it. You give them their space, and then you work with what they do. And rock throwing is just one of the things they do. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they're awake at night, and they see us retreating to a tent, and they've been enjoying watching you. They watch you talk. They watch you sit in your chair. They watch you fix a pot of coffee. They watch you just kind of meandering around your campsite and doing what you do. And then you retreat into your tent at 10 o'clock or dark 30 or whatever. Maybe they can't understand why a hominid like them is sleeping at night when they should be up like they are. So they're dinking and dunking rocks all night long so you can get your ass back up.
You think it's more of a, I want to get your attention, I'm up here sort of thing, as opposed to, I guess I know I came off kind of brash, but I kind of agree with you in a lot of cases, because
that's their active time. And I don't think they can understand that we have a different sleep pattern than they do. They don't understand, why aren't you up like we are? Why are you sleeping when we should be up? It doesn't make any sense to them, maybe.
Well, and to your point, a lot of times when witnesses describe rock throwing, it seems to be little pebbles. It's not really meant to. It's not like that. There is occasions where it's beyond pebbles, but I think that is truly aggression. But I would tend to agree with you. I guess I take back what I said. A lot of times, you're right. When they tend to throw rocks, my impression, especially hearing from so many witnesses, that it seems to be more of trying to get someone's attention as opposed to beaming someone with a softball. You know what I mean?
So if you use that logic, let's just say that makes the most sense to what's going on, because it's consistent and it consistently happens that way. So let's just think that that's probably logically what it means. So here it is outside of the tent or outside of a cabin or outside of whatever, and you're sitting in lawn chairs, and you still hear rocks landing. You still hear a pebble hitting the ground or hitting a tree close by or whatever. So using that same logic, it makes sense that way too. They're still throwing rocks even when you're not in the tent. So could it mean something? Think about this. They work really hard to find their hiding spot. They sometimes crawl for 30 or 40 minutes, belly crawling and finger crawling to get to that spot, to get as close as they possibly can with their comfort level to see you. But they're still having trouble seeing you. So they launch a few rocks. They hardly ever hit you. That's the ones that might hit somebody on their shoulder or arm or something is probably accidental from getting deflected by a branch. Most of the time, they're just landing all over the place, randomly. But we often get up and go over and try to find the rock or look around. So it makes sense that they're using that to get you to do what they want to do, and that is see you better. So you get up and you start moving around because the rocks are landing and you're trying to find them, and they don't have to give up their hiding spot. They don't have to move because we're the ones moving because of the rocks they're throwing.
Well, let me ask you this, and you bring up great points, Randy, and that's why I like having you on the show. You're one of the few researchers I really enjoy talking to. I hope that came across the right way, but you know what I mean.
Thank you, yes.
And, I understand what you're saying. Has there been anything beyond rock throwing that you personally would perceive as aggression, or do you find it to be more curious, like trying to get your attention type of stuff?
Well, when I was in Washington up by Mount St. Helens, and I'll let you hear that bluff charge that I got, and I was sitting in the truck with two other guys at the time, and even the bluff charge, as aggressive as it sounded, I have to think that most things that happen may not necessarily, other than the rock throwing, may not necessarily be for our benefit when it comes to vocalizations or tree knocks, they're clearly talking to another Bigfoot. That's why we try not to interfere with that. But this bluff charge, on the other hand, you have to think that it was directed towards us, but when it ran towards the truck, and we actually braced ourselves because I thought it was going to hit the side of a truck. Imagine on the African savannah when you see those rhinos hit the side of a truck as they're trying to drive through a field and the rhinos chasing it and hitting it. That's what I was imagining. I was imagining this thing was about to plow into the side of my truck and I was bracing for impact. And he ran right on by the truck and then walked into the woods, and you can hear him walking away almost dejected, like he had just spent his charge. And that was what he wanted to do. He built himself up. You could hear him pacing like he was having to build up his nerve. And when he took off running, you could hear his feet hitting the ground coming down the road towards the truck. And then he blew right by it and walked into the woods and and you could hear him breaking a few branches as he was walking away, spent. It's almost like it's weird. It's not like it was as aggressive as it appeared to be when you start looking at the details and breaking it down and listening to what's happening before and after. But he just spent himself, and we never got any more rocks thrown or anything after that. So there may have been a display, a superior display for some ambitious juveniles who may not have been listening to the tree knock that he did before that told him it's time to vacate.
In my opinion, I do think there is aggressive situations where people get hurt. But going back to what you were just talking about, I think a lot of what they do is meant to terrify you, is meant to get you to leave. And it's like the bluff charge you're talking about. I've heard a lot of bluff charges, and hence the term bluff charge, because no one actually ever gets hit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And let me ask you, going back to this property, what is it? What's kind of next on the agenda, and what are you guys hoping to accomplish?
Well, why I think placing the rocks and having them throw the specific rocks that we placed in this particular area is so huge. Knowing where they're working from is gargantuan in moving forward with what we're trying to get here, because the hardest part is, trying to find them. So here it is. I think they're creatures of habit. I mean, I've caught some pictures on video on game cameras where one walked over a ridge, and I thought to myself, if he walked across that ridge to look down at my campsite once, he will probably use that same trajectory again because it was safe. So that's where I put the game cams and caught 2 pictures on my game cam. So at least as I'm trying to use logic, it's some things pan out, some things don't. So here I'm thinking, we put the tent up there, and 2 nights in a row, we got rocks thrown from exactly the same spots. So we're going to go back there this weekend, and we're going to, of course, place a bunch of rocks. We're going to mark rocks and place them up in there because I want to make sure they have plenty of rocks to throw. That seems to be one of their things. If they've placed all the rocks up in that area, then I don't want them to move because they don't have enough rocks to throw. So we're going to place rocks there and give them plenty of ammunition and hope they go exactly to the same spots again. And we're going to cut some tree branches, and we're going to hide my thermal up in a tree hidden in a way that watches that area, but still be far enough away that they don't hear any noises or maybe any electromagnetics coming from the camera or whatever. We're going to have it close enough to our campsite where they think it's part of our campsite, but still up over the crest of the hill watching where we think they're throwing the rocks from. If we can get an hour or 2 of them behaving that we can watch behaviors, we think that's going to be huge.
It is going to be huge, man. No one else has been able to do that, and it's like I said, I know I'm hard on researchers. I get emails all the time about, researchers this, researchers that. But I hear a lot of talk from them, but you never hear about really what they do. And that's one thing I've always appreciated about you and guys like, and I mentioned before, Paul Graves, and because you guys will break it down what you're doing, and I'll walk away and go, that's brilliant. I mean, who cares what I think at the end of the day, but I'll walk away and go, wow, that's brilliant, man. I would have never thought of something like that. And I hope you guys do capture them. I want to ask you, and you don't have to give away too much on the property, but is there any ideas on where they go during the day or when they're not around? Do you guys have any ideas on where they're actually going?
the owner has a very, very small cabin way up by the road, by the paved road that turns into this 400 acres, and it's surrounded by other properties and other wildlife management areas and stuff like that. And we found like a 2-week pattern where, at least in the summertime, where they'll travel and then come back. So they're not specifically stuck on this property, but it's still a good sized property. But they clearly still are moving around in some kind of big trajectory to where they go and do whatever, and then work their way back. So I can't, I can only tell you what we've seen, and the landowner has seen them cross the road. There more than one where they've crossed in a group. So we think they travel off as a family and then come back as a family, where he's seen 2 or 3 of them cross the road at the same time. So back onto his property. So I don't know. I can only tell you what people see and what we see.
No, I understand. It's hard to say where they go. The only reason why I ask that is a lot of times I'll have witnesses on very similar situation to what you're talking about. And then they'll say, there was a cave actually up on this hill. And I'm pretty sure that's where this thing goes at night. Or they'll say there's
I don't know too much about these animals. I mean, I've spent a lot of time and money, and I've really enjoyed the process, but I'm learning enough. And the fact that they seem to need about a 50-yard safety zone as far when they're following and pacing and peeking around trees and things like that, they still keep their distance. So they are very comfortable. They need a certain amount of distance that gives them a comfort level in case they get backed in a corner and they need to retreat. They can't get themselves in a bind. And I don't think sleeping in the cave is in their nature, because they can get caught in a cave. So I think chasing caves is a waste of time. I think they're out in the open. I think they're constantly out in the open. That's why they use so many tree knocks and rock clacks to communicate, because they're out in the open doing what they do. They nap up on the sides of mountains, and they nap in ravines. And if anybody gets close, you're going to hear a tree knock. And I think that's designed to wake everybody up and start paying attention, because people are getting close. And that happens so often that I think you can rule out caves as being the place that they sleep.
I hear you. Well, I wish you guys luck on this whole thing. I know you guys have been hard at work at it, and I've talked to Shane, and I know you guys are really trying your best to get what you can get out there. I really hope you guys are successful, to be honest with you.
Well, we have an influx, as you know, I think Shane spoke to you. We've got a possibility of an influx of equipment without compromising how we do things. We don't ever want anybody else involved over us that's going to donate equipment that says, now you must do things my way because I'm giving you the equipment. So we found a way that somebody may give us some equipment and still let us do things our way, because we don't want to jeopardize or change anything, because we think we're heading in the right direction. So we feel really fortunate with some doors that are opening up for us. And so we hope to take advantage of that equipment-wise. And we still like to share. We love sharing what we're getting. And I think everybody who's into research will agree that this rock throwing and marking them was huge. It may not be as huge to somebody that's not into research, but it's huge to me. And it really has let us take a step forward in what we can do after that. The moment you know where they're at is you've won part of the battle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I wish you guys luck. I hope you come back and give us updates on what's happening down there, man.
Right on, brother. I will. I like talking about it.
To Randy Harrington, everyone. Randy, thanks for coming on, brother.
All right. Bye-bye, buddy.
It's a trap!
Bingo, everyone. Bingo, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
Oh, thanks, Wes. It's an honor to be here, man. I'm just glad and tickled to death anytime you bring me on.
No, absolutely. What'd you honestly think of the interview with Randy and those guys marking rocks? What's your take on it? Shoot me straight
Well,
on this.
I'm going to tell you, my take is that they're awesome because, there's from what I gather and everything you say about the Bigfoot researchers, there's a lot of egos involved and things like that. And these guys, they're trying to get to the truth. They're giving people pointers on how to get these things on film or how to record them, and that's awesome. It's unselfish. And if there's anybody out there that I hope gets them on film, it's people like that. It was awesome the way they set up about having those rocks thrown, and they could see where they're coming from and which piles were used and which piles weren't used. That goes a long way into setting up cameras in the right spot or putting recorders there to get the evidence they need. And y'all were talking also about aggressive Bigfoot encounters and passive Bigfoot encounters. I think this is my opinion. It's probably due to their interactions with people. If somebody in their pod has been shot at, or they've been shot at, or there's a bunch of hunting going on in the area, they're going to be on high alert. They're going to be nervous. They're going to be aggressive. And these guys go in there with no guns or anything. They're just trying to research and figure out what these things are. And I think that probably has a lot to do with that. That's why it's probably a passive encounter, because they don't hear any gunshots going off or anything like that.
They really are good guys. I give Bigfoot researchers a hard time, and I think it's well-deserved, to be honest with you, with most of them. But there is good ones. They're not all bad. And I think Randy and Shane, I can think of a few others like Brenda Harris down in the Southwest, Paul Graves, smart guys, smart guys and girls. And Randy's like that, man. He'll come up with these crazy ideas. And I'm like, I don't know about that, Randy. And then, bam, it worked. And he's done that several times. What were you going to say, Bingo?
Brenda Harris is a friend of mine on Facebook, so I know who she is.
Oh, yeah, Brenda's great. There's been many times I've called Brenda off the air. I've called Paul Graves. I've called Randy. I've talked to Shane a couple times off the air. Good people. There is good people. I wish there was more of them as opposed to what you get in the Bigfoot world. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
A lot.
Shows and
yeah, a lot of them are like the worst human beings you ever met in your life. Off the air, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But no, Wes, oh man, it's just an honor to be on the show. I had a couple of things that I want to say real quick. If you
sure, take it away.
Like you know how I said that I believe that they're something more. They're just not an animal. Well, I want to know the truth, right? I don't care if they are an animal. We just need to figure out what they are. But there's a couple of things that, on the subject of experimenting, there's a couple of things I'm interested in. Like, what's his name? David Paulides, 411. He says that these tracking dogs will stop in their tracks and they'll be afraid of tracking these things or following a scent. And you got all kinds of people come on your show that say they have the bravest dogs in the world, but when these things are around, they'll take off running. So I'm wondering, like, maybe an experiment of getting a tracking dog to see if it'll track a mountain gorilla and see if it'll just shut down like that, or my mind's just curious. I want to know what they are. So,
yeah, you and me both, man. You and me both. That's why I always ask people, what do you think Bigfoot is? Because there's really no wrong answers.
One more thing that I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah.
When we were in Tomball at the show, I was talking to one of your listeners at the table, and she said she was in a 300-acre ranch here in Texas, and it was during the blood moon, which it wasn't too long ago, and she said that all the animals in the forest were yipping and yapping and going crazy with that blood moon. Then she said everything in the forest went quiet for about 2 minutes, and then she heard the loudest, most guttural yell she'd ever heard in her life. She said it scared the death out of her. I mean, she was scared. But what animal in nature has that ability to do that type of stuff? So that's why I'm curious, and that's why I want to know what they are, and I know we all do. So I just want to throw my 2 cents in there.
No, yeah, and there is a lot of things like that, Bingo, with these things. I mean, there's a lot of weird things. I would love for it to be an animal. I absolutely would love for it just to be a normal animal we haven't caught up with. But there's a lot of questions I have that I don't think most people could answer that makes me believe there's something else going on. You know what I mean?
You and I both, Wes. You and I both.
Well, do you have any ideas for the guys up there I can pass along to Randy and Shane? Let them know Bingo sent this idea over?
Oh no! You know what? I will think about that, and I'll try and get back and get something to you, because I think what they're coming up with is awesome, and they're sharing it with the world. You know, I hope they get it on video, and I hope because of their tips, other people get it on video, because they're like awesome. They're unselfish, and those guys deserve, the reward compared to some of these other people.
Yeah, super nice guys. I was telling Randy I hope he solves it so I can go do something else. But I got Will coming up next. William he's in Las Vegas, but he actually saw these lights coming in and he blacked out when the lights came up to the window. You ever seen the lights down there, Bingo, in Texas? You ever seen the balls of light?
No, I haven't seen anything like that. I told you about my ghost experiences, but no, balls of light, nothing like that.
Nothing like that, huh?
But, no. But like I said, I'm off for the summer. If anybody down here in Texas is looking for them, give them my email, and I'd love to go out on one of these things and look for myself and try these techniques that these guys told us about this past week.
Yeah, I will. There's an area down there where you're at where locals go down to watch the balls of light. I forget what the area is called. I'll have to call someone.
Really? I'd like to do that too.
I'll see if I can't. I'll send you a camera down there to go down there if you end up going. I'll call the person though, but it's almost like a nightly. They even had scientists come out and they couldn't figure out what it was, but it's these weird balls of light that fly around. It's down there in southeast Texas. I'll see if I can't find the area and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'll go down there in a heartbeat and go see what's going on.
Well, it was definitely good hearing from you, Bingo. I guess I'll get back to finishing the show.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, Wes. Like I said, I love the show, man.
Take care, brother.
All right, you too.
Well, next up on the show, I want to welcome Will. Will, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I was fascinated with your account with the lights. If you would, take us back to that moment. What were you doing? Now, this happened in Georgia, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's in Marietta, Georgia. It was about 8 years ago. I was like 16, 17 at the time. And I had actually just gotten on a plane to fly to Georgia to go see my dad. I'm based in Vegas now, based in Vegas then as well. And I had taken kind of a later night flight. There's like a 3-hour difference between Vegas and Georgia. So I had gotten into Georgia. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then my dad came and picked me up from the airport, brought me back to his house. By the time we got there, I think it was like 11:30, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there. And this was, I want to say like December 27th. We had just flown in just for holiday stuff. My parents are split, so I usually spend Christmas with my mom, and then I spend after Christmas with my dad. So we got to his house, and everybody was pretty tired because it's kind of late. So he kind of just got cleaned up and went to bed, and I just got set up on the couch, and I'll describe their house pretty quick. It's like a 3-level house. We don't have basements in Vegas, so I'm not sure like how many stories that is on the East Coast, but his house is kind of built into a hill. His basement is in the hill, and then the first floor that you would enter into is about like 30 feet off the ground if you're looking at it from the back of his house. And then there's a top floor to that. And on the main floor, there's a deck that kind of looks out into the woods, and he's got like 3 miles of forest behind his house. It's kind of cool looking. It's real pretty. So I got set up on the couch, which is in the living room, kind of overlooking this deck that overlooks the woods. I got settled in. It was about midnight, maybe a little bit later, but it had just kind of hit midnight. I was just reading a book, just kind of trying to get tired because I was still 3 hours ahead, or 3 hours behind, rather. And I'm looking out the windows because I noticed these like 3 kind of lights. They're just like real faint, just kind of out in the woods. And I just kind of brushed it off. I thought they were like fireflies or something. I mean, kind of weird. There's usually not fireflies in the middle of December, but anyways, I just kind of shrugged it off. And over the next 5-10 minutes, these lights start getting closer, and I can definitely tell that they're moving. And it wasn't like they were moving quickly. They were floating pretty slowly, just kind of taking their time, really kind of wobbling. Just from far away, I could tell like maybe they were 10, 15 feet off the floor. It was a pretty clear night. And they start getting progressively closer. And I kind of realized that I'm not able to look away from these things. I was just kind of mesmerized, and I could not avert my eyes. And these things start getting really close. I mean, to the point where they're, 10, 15 feet from the backyard gate area. And at that point, I'm like, man, I don't know what these things are, but they're kind of freaking me out. And I was very, very afraid. And so I'm almost like gripped with fear. Couldn't move, couldn't look away. And then these things floated over the backyard gate. It was kind of at that moment that I knew that this wasn't something normal. It's not bugs or anything like that. And they proceeded to float up to the bay window area, literally right outside the window, and begin to bob up and down. And I mean, they were about like I'd say like basketball size, almost translucent. They were like a very vibrant green. I mean, they were absolutely beautiful. They were real freaky to look at. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The closest thing I could describe it to would be like a firefly almost, just that type of glow. Kind of just real eerie. I had no idea what it was, but it was very eerie. And these things began to bob up and down. Started out slowly, and it was a real random pattern. I mean, like 2 of them would go up at the same time. One of them would drop down, that sort of thing. And progressively, this got faster and faster. And at some point, I blacked out, and I have no idea what happened after that. But I woke up the next morning, just with a ton of questions, and it was a bizarre encounter.
Did you black out right there in front of the window? Is that where you woke up?
No, I had been sitting on the couch, which was, I don't know, maybe 5-6 feet from the window.
I gotcha. And you said there was 3 of them?
Yeah.
And then tell me about your arm. Tell me about what's on your wrist.
Yeah. So I had woken up the next day, and I had a horrible migraine. And I had some actually pretty serious pain in my left forearm. I was looking at it. It wasn't swollen or anything, but kind of up by my thumb, the palm of my hand, there was a small bluish, kind of silver-looking metal object that was, I don't know, I'd say about 3 or 4 centimeters under my skin. It wasn't raised or anything, but it was never there before. And, my forearm hurt like hell. And that was concerning because it definitely was not there the night before.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. What do you think actually happened? I mean, do you think you were abducted? I mean, it's such a bizarre, and the strange part about this, Will, is I would love to say this is the first time I've heard it. I was telling you about a surgeon who told me a very similar story, minus the thing in his arm, but a very similar story where he blacked out after seeing these lights, and he woke up and like 6 hours had gone by. He didn't know what had gone with the time. What do you think happened? Do you think you were abducted, or, I mean, have you made sense of this?
I genuinely don't know. I mean, I'm like a very skeptical person. I don't really have any beliefs in anything. I'm an atheist. I don't really believe in supernatural or anything like that. But I genuinely have no idea what this was. Based on some other accounts that I've heard and read about, like other people have had similar experiences and have chalked it up to UFOs or something like that, but I legitimately don't know. I'm not ready to take that sort of leap and say that's definitely what it was.
The thing on your arm, did you ever have it taken out or removed?
I took it out myself, actually. I actually had not exactly a line for line same type of encounter, but this was a couple of years ago. I was back in Vegas. I'd say this is maybe 4 or 5 years after the event, and I was just out for a night hike. We've got a cool area out here called Calico Basin. It's like right before you get into Red Rock Canyon. I was just out there doing an evening to, night hike. About the same time, actually. It's November, December. And I was just summiting one of the little mountains out there. And, I was just kind of admiring the stars because it's like one of the only clear places in Vegas where you can look at the sky. I was looking up and I saw this little green light just kind of up in the sky. I just thought it was an airplane or something. There's always green lights in the sky, but it wasn't moving. And I looked at this thing for 5-10 minutes and it hadn't budged. So I started getting kind of freaked out again. And, this experience really just kind of came back to my mind. And I was like, oh man, I need to get out of here. So I booked it down the trail and went home. And a couple of days later, I got some forceps and a little X-Acto knife, and I cut this little thing on my arm. And it was difficult to remove. I'm a facilities tech guy, and I work with metal and, carpentry and all sorts of things. And I've had, iron or steel, little bits of steel, little bits of carbon fiber in my skin before. And, they're relatively easy to pull out. But this was almost impossible. There was a ton of fibers that had grown around this thing, and it would not budge. Eventually I was able to cut it around it enough and pull it out. And it was the weirdest thing. I mean, it was really hard, kind of like steel, but it was like bluish silver still, but it almost had like a dark gray, like patina around it, from when I had, first seen this thing in my skin. And, I took it out and I tossed it in the trash. I had some pictures of it, but I don't think they made the transfer when I swapped to a new phone. But it was the weirdest thing, and it hurt a lot taking it out. I mean, obviously, if you're pulling anything out of your skin, it's going to hurt. But this thing hurt way more than usual.
Sometimes I talk to people off there who've had alien type encounters or UFO encounters or strange lights encounters, and sometimes they'll describe that, and I've seen pictures of it underneath the skin. It's under a real thin layer of the skin. You'd think your body would reject it, but everyone I talk to, it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like your body accepts it for the most part, except for the pain. It's not like it's reject. I mean, what happens when you put a splinter into your skin? What's the first thing your body tries to do? It swells up, tries to get rid of it. And what I find interesting with these things is doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, I've had splinters and stuff embedded in my skin before, and within the first week, your body will usually push it out if you can't get to it.
How big would you say it was? The thing that you pulled out? And you're a madman for pulling it out, but I don't blame you. I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah, I was freaked out. I was tired of having it in my skin. I would say it was about 2 centimeters. It was really small. It looked a lot bigger from the surface of my skin, and I legitimately thought it was going to be a lot deeper. But just for how raised it was in my skin, I was baffled that it was taking so long to take that thing out.
Let me ask you, and obviously you and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious on your opinion. Do you think it was some sort of tracking device? Because you mentioned you'd seen the lights again when you were hiking Red Rock Canyon.
Again, I don't know. Hell, anything possible, but, I genuinely don't know. Again, off of different accounts I've heard, other people have made that jump, but I don't know if I'm ready to do that.
No, I know. I was just curious on your opinion. Did you ever tell anyone? Did you tell your dad what happened, or anyone at the house what actually took place?
I have told a couple people. I've told my brother, one of my older brothers, and then my best friend. And my brother, he was real freaked out because, he goes and stays there too. And then my buddy's a big skeptic and everything, and he was curious, but I mean, he kind of just chalked it up to one of those things, or he's not sure. I haven't told my dad yet. I mentioned the lights to my stepmother, actually, that lives out there, and she was real freaked out about it. I mean, she's real into, like, you know, woo-woo stuff, and you know, she had told me about some like hauntings and stuff that had gone on at their house, and I wasn't ready to make that leap, but I mean, it was interesting information.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating account, man. I mean, it's one of those things to where, and I don't know what to make of it. I've seen it before. I remember a lady contacted me one time, told me about she'd been taken several times, and she's like, I can prove it to you. And I don't know if the photo you sent me was a before or after picture, but it's kind of similar. I mean, similar type of injury, except for she had it behind her ear and one on her stomach. And it looked like a tiny little, I guess how you described it, like a very, very small piece of metal underneath her skin. It didn't look like it belonged there, like something had placed it there. But there was no, her body wasn't rejecting them. She actually still has them in, and she's going to find a surgeon to take them out. You know, I'd be more like you. Most people won't do that, but I'd be just like you. I'd probably cut myself open, yank it out, put a Band-Aid on it, and call it a day. That's really terrifying. Have you ever thought about doing hypnosis or anything like that, just to find out what actually happened? Maybe more happened that night than you remember.
I've thought about it. This is a kind of a tangent thing, but my stepfather, he's the one that lives in Vegas now. He's retired Air Force. He flew the stealth fighters, the F-117s. He flew those for 10 years, and he's told me like a little bit about what they have to do to like keep their classified status. And like one of the things that they're not allowed to do is they're not allowed to go under hypnosis. And I've always found that interesting. It doesn't really have anything to do with me, but I've just always thought like, man, if they're not allowed to do that, you know, why is that? And I've just never been super comfortable with the thought of sitting down and, you know, somebody putting me to sleep and, you know, trying to pull answers out of my head. That's a little strange for me.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I'm one of those guys, and maybe it's arrogant of me to say it. I don't know that I could be hypnotized. You know what I mean? I just don't know that maybe it's a lack of focus or something, but I don't know that I could be hypnotized. But in your situation, it would be nice to find out what actually happened. Right before you blacked out, were you sick, or did you have any sort of feeling right before you blacked out when you were looking at these lights?
I was terrified. That's like the only distinct thing I remember about that event is I was absolutely terrified. It was like completely, I mean, I don't know if it was a rational fear, but I mean, it felt like a rational fear at the time because, you know, it's just lights in front of me. But, you know, there was something in me that did not like what was going on. And, you know, I was absolutely terrified. Yeah,
I would have been too, man. I would have been too. It's a terrifying account, and I really appreciate you sharing it. You know, it's one of those things I think actually goes on more than most people talk about. You know, I mean, I run a Bigfoot show, and I've heard it several times off the air. You know, beyond Bigfoot, I've heard some very bizarre encounters off the air. And even the lady that sent me the chip underneath her, behind her ear and on her stomach, and then the surgeon I was telling you about, how he blacked out. He saw these lights and he thought they were people coming out with flashlights. Quickly realized they weren't. He blacked out and doesn't remember what happened. Makes you wonder what's going on, man. I've seen the lights. I know the light you're talking about. It was, when you say it's brilliant and it's beautiful to look at, but it's terrifying in the same breath, I get it. I completely get it. And I wasn't as close as you were. I was up on a hill with night vision filming one, and I just could not figure out what in the world I was looking at. You know, the light, one listener took a still shot of the video I took and said, hey, look, there's a face in there. And it did look like there was a face in the light. Now, is that pareidolia? Is that, you know, when you look in the clouds, you can see what you want to see? Maybe. But I had never seen that before till he did the still shot. But, you know, again, it could be pareidolia. It could be anything. But they are terrifying to look at. They are scary for whatever reason.
Yeah, real eerie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing it.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to call me. I appreciate it.
And stay cool in Vegas, man. You're getting right up to that time of year where everyone hates Vegas till about September.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually been a little bit cooler, but this week it finally jumped back up to like 95, so it's going to be hot.
Yeah, it's well, that's not too bad for Vegas. That's hot, but it's, I've been there when it's 120, man. And I love that Red Rock Canyon. You're absolutely right. That is about that, and probably Mount Charleston is probably the only places in Vegas you can go to actually see the sky because there's so much light pollution. But yeah, brother, thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
Intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany.